All right, I believe I'm recording. So, all right, well, I will get started and just kind of go through, and then hopefully we'll have some time for questions at the end. Can everybody see my screen with this ARPC performance? All right, sweet. Well, just kind of getting right into the nitty gritty of it. I think there's been a lot of questions about what is performance. So really performance is just a sector of Atlanta Rehab that has Atlanta Rehab PT clinics inside of sports performance gyms. A couple of years ago, kind of got this idea and worked with Biggie and John and TJ to kind of look at, pushing our athletic rehab to, a more return to sport area where we have more space, more turf, more equipment. And so we looked at some gyms that we had partnerships with over the past that we had done NFL Combine coverage with or recovery with or anything like that. So we found some gyms that were already partners with Atlanta Rehab and decided to put PT clinics inside of there. So that's kind of how this started. It started around the spring or January of 2021. So it's really only been around for about 2 years now, just to kind of give some reference about how long this has been going on. Performance mostly focuses on return to sport rehabilitation, injury prevention training. Our PTAs that are in there are certified strength conditioning specialists or some sort of personal training certification as well. Currently, there are 5 performance clinics: PPF, which is in Cumming; Peak, which is in Buford; MVP or IVSA, which is in the Oakwood area; Hyper is in the Norcross Peachtree Corners area; and then Uplift is in the Loganville area. As far as why do we have performance, I think it allows us to take an athlete back fully to sport with decreased risk of re-injury. At these clinics, we have, like I said, increased access to equipment, space to fully prepare and expose our patients to the demands of their sport without having to work with an outside source strength conditioning coach or write-up programs for our athletic trainers to go through while they're also covering sports as well. They also give us a new form of marketing to gym communities that we might not have access with. So it's also very closely related to our outreach program, where as we are wearing our logos and having branding inside of these gyms, it allows us to bring in more referrals from people who attend the gym or families who bring their kids to gyms. It just gives us another form of outreach that we may not have access to outside of our athletic training sports outreach program. It also allows our young athletes to rehab in a space that is familiar with their life and their sport. These gyms typically have loud music, they have weights, they have other athletes, some of their friends working out in the gym in close proximity. This can lead to reduced depression, anxiety, and can also increase compliance over a long-term plan of care, like a 9-month to a year rehab. As far as how does performance impact or benefit Atlanta Rehab as a company, I think by expanding into this sector, I think we've increased our hold on referral sources, as now they kind of rely solely on us for their return to sport patients. But this also allows them to keep our name more closely related for all types of patients to be sent across the spectrum of Atlanta Rehab. Also, as we have performance centers that patients can transition to for return to sport training, it allows us to free up schedules in our other clinics and space in our other clinics to allow room for new patients to schedule evaluations and more space for patients to perform exercises that may be taking up space with plyometrics, agility, and change of direction activity, so other patients can use the equipment in the gym. And then most patients that are involved in these return to sport rehabs are also doing it at cash rate after their benefits have exhausted. So it allows for these lower reimbursement patients, these patients on student rates, to be freed up out of the clinic and have our higher reimbursement rate patients on insurance be seen mostly in the clinics. As far as how does performance affect current or transitioning patients from our established clinics to our performance clinics, I think it should primarily act as a next step for patients who have exhausted the resources a clinic can provide, whether that's space, equipment, time, expertise, or comfortability with regards to return to sport training and injury prevention. There will be some post-op patients that are sent directly to performance clinics just due to connections with a referral source or with a friend or a teammate or something like that who wants to rehab from start to finish in a performance clinic, but that's not typically the route that we are going to push and call for moving forward. And that's never been the plan anyway throughout the inception of Performance. And then if there's ever a patient coming to your office that's looking for Performance or looking for a return to sport rehab, or if you're feeling like a patient that you have would be better suited in a Performance clinic or something like that, Lexi Colser is our office coordinator for Performance, and this is her contact information, and they will help schedule. But if there's anything that y'all need from a Performance side or from a rehab side or from return to sport or anything like that, I'm glad to help. It's more so I just feel like I need to be asked. If I don't know, I can't help. But that's pretty much Performance in a nutshell. Hopefully this clears up things that were not discussed in the company meeting a couple of weeks ago. But if there's any other questions about Performance, I will be glad to answer them. Yes, sir. Yeah, wonderful question. Typically, we try to honor those student rates. So if they were on a student rate coming from a clinic, we typically try not to bring them on just because it can be uncomfortable for people to kind of have to stomach a new cost. But as far as patients who are looking for return to sport rehabilitation, so we have some patients that transition from our Emory, referring doctors that were doing rehab at Emory, we get them on at a rate of $65 a visit, which is our return to sport rate on the custom codes that should be available to everybody. But like I said, there's also situations where we have to be fluid and be mindful and be service based. And if there's a situation where we need to be at a student rate for somebody who may not be able to afford it or something like that, there's the same way that we handle our business in the clinics, we handle it through Performance. But our base rate is $65 per visit. 2 to 3 typically. It depends because sometimes kids, when they get back to sport, still continue with rehab from like an injury prevention or maintenance phase. And so sometimes those people drop down to a once a week just because they have practices and games and they're kind of fully integrated back into their sport. So those typically drop down to a once a week or a once every other week. But your typical like person who's not in sport, they're coming 2 to 3 times a week pretty consistently. Yep. Sure. 100%. Yeah. So, Kyle, can you see that pretty good on your screen? Awesome. And then we also have them on our locations sheet as well that I can email out to everybody that kind of has like our clinic locations on the map. I'll pull that up really quick, Kyle. Give me just a second. They should be on this sheet as well, if you can see that, Kyle. All right. Sure. Sure, absolutely. Any other questions that anybody can think of? Like I said, hopefully this is a time where I can try to answer as many questions as I can. If not, I'm available whenever you guys need to ask questions, but chances are if you have a question, somebody else here also has a question. So that same question, so it might answer a question for somebody else who hasn't asked. Yeah, sure. So hopefully moving forward, I've worked with Kyle in Loganville a little bit, and then I've worked with I've worked in Cumming a little bit too, so I've kind of had the luxury of working alongside some of the therapists in Cumming and Buford. So I'll frequently look through some of the charts and kind of see what they do. I've done that before with patients that have transitioned over to performance throughout the years and kind of just looked through their daily notes and kind of seen their progressions and stuff. And it just kind of prompted me that maybe I should go over some of these things with people, some trends that I'm seeing or some things that I've learned in the past and some mistakes that I've also made to try to help allow people not to make those mistakes on patients. So I worked with Kyle in Loganville, looked through some of their charts, kind of just wrote down some notes on some things that I saw. I wrote down some recommendations on some things that I think they could be doing in their ACL rehabs a little bit better, and came down and did a little like just lunch and learn type of thing with some of the therapists. And I'm very willing and open to do some of that stuff. Once again, it's not coming from a point of condescension or like dictatorship. It's more so I've made a lot of mistakes. I'm fortunate to have a lot of reps with ACLs throughout their plan of care, so I've learned a lot of things along the way and made a lot of mistakes. So trying to help share what I've learned and not keep it bottled up to just performance, so that we as a company kind of become the leaders and stay the leaders in sports rehab. So if anybody wants to have that happen or is interested in that, just let me know, and I'll look through some of the charts of ACLs that are coming through your clinics and kind of give some recommendations and some things that I think could be improved on to get better results or improved outcomes. I kind of look at it as like proofreading your own paper. When you were in English class, like proofreading your own paper, you tend to overlook some things that you did, whether it's spelling mistakes or punctuation mistakes or something like that. Having somebody else look at your chart, they can look at it a little more critical. So even in my own charts, I look at them like they're perfect and I didn't do anything wrong. But when somebody else looks at my charts, I'm like, oh man, I'm an idiot. I should have been doing this or should have been doing that. So I think it's a good thing to do, even if you don't utilize me to do it. Have your clinic manager do it, or have somebody else look at it and kind of audit your charts and make sure that you're documenting correctly, but also programming and loading correctly as well. Sure. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah. So we have different checkpoints and different timelines that we're looking at for different points in the rehab that we're doing some of these objective measures and stuff. Early on, we're looking for kind of extension to be restored by week 4. So we want full extension to be restored. With that, we kind of want normalized gait to be restored at that time too. But then our next big checkpoint is 12 weeks. This thing would open up when it's supposed to. Give me just a second, Drew. I'm sorry. My computer is trying to screen record and open up an Excel document at the same time, and apparently my MacBook Pro is unable to do that. Come on, Steve Jobs, be there. All right. So at 12 weeks, we're doing a Y balance test. We're doing quad strength, and I put hamstring strength on there. I'm really only hamstring strength testing those that are hamstring grafts. I just haven't seen enough reason to do hamstring testing on people just from the amount of isokinetic tests I've seen from Emory, the amount of hamstring testing I've done on people with dynamometers in the clinic to support wasting 5 minutes on a hamstring strength test. They're typically always symmetrical because the hamstrings don't take a hit. But it can be something that if you want to do that, you can. I'm just not testing hamstrings. I'm doing a single leg squat max rep test, typically to about a 20-inch box or a chair in your clinic, and to see how many reps they can do. And I'm also looking at the quality, if they're getting good knee over toe activity or if they're using just predominantly a hip strategy. And then I do a depth land analysis. I'll actually have them drop and land. And as long as they are able to correct or kind of work through some of their motor control deficits, such as like valgus upon landing or decreased knee flexion upon landing, I would consider that a passing test. So Y balance, quad hamstring strength with an isometric dynamometer. We've used different ones. We've used the Lafayette, and then now we're using Tendec. Single leg squat max reps, we're looking for more than 15. Depth land, we're looking for ability to correct motor control deficits. And then the other things that we're looking at that aren't on here are regaining full range of motion. Regaining full range of motion may be different for somebody depending on how skinny your calves and hamstrings are. It may be 145 degrees for a young cheerleader, but it might be 125 for an offensive lineman because their calves and their thighs hit together. So we're just looking for regaining full range of motion in that time frame. And then at 6 months, we're doing quad and hamstring strength again, but we're adding in hop testing. So if they passed their Y balance testing, we're no longer doing that. And if they passed their single leg squat max reps, we're no longer testing that. We're now going to do hop testing. We're going to do a single hop, a triple hop, a crossover hop, and then we've added a medial hop for distance, a single medial hop for distance as well. We feel like it gives us a little more variability. And then we're doing a quad and a hamstring strength testing again as well. The thing that is not on the 9-month return to play is we are now doing a Blaze Pod reactive T-test. I can send you that. I can send you that video to kind of see what we're doing with that. Essentially, everything in ACL rehab right now is strength and jump based. And there's not a lot of agility or change of direction tests. There's like a 5-10-5, there's a T-test you can do, but those don't incorporate the reactive components that come with return to sport. So we're kind of trying some reactive T-tests to get a reactive agility deficit to see what we can find. And then if we find some good data, we're gonna present it to Emory to see if they wanna use it in their publications. But right now we're looking at if you're about 0.8 of a second slower on your reactive T-test compared to your typical T-test, we're considering that a failed test. So we want it to be as close 0.8 of a second within their reaction time as their non-reaction time. But those are the main ones. If you're using other stuff, you can. If you don't have an isometric dynamometer in your clinic, I recommend doing maybe like a 10 rep max or like a 1 rep max on a hamstring or a quad or a knee extension machine. Whatever works for you. The hop testing should be able to be administered. All you need is a tape measure. If you don't have a Y balance test kit, I can send you a video on how to do an anterior reach, which is the most important component of the Y balance test anyway. So you can do that without a Y balance test kit. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. No. No, I mean, that's a phenomenal question. And I think it depends on the testee and and what you're using. I'm currently around 65% is what I'm doing. I've run into a lot of people lately, David, with test anxiety, and they like look awesome throughout rehab, and they're like a stud, and then all of a sudden they get to their testing and they're like they like crumble. It's really strange. Um, mhm. Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So this is kind of what I'm looking at right here, David. If you can see that. Um, but I mean, I think a lot of it is because we're using a battery of testing. Essentially, I've seen a lot of people be able to single leg squat with really good form and be able to smash single leg squat, and then their strength looks really terrible. Or vice versa, they can like Y balance test really, really good, but they can't single leg squat with proper form or whatever. Like I'm more so just using it as kind of like a colander to catch as many people through that filter as I can. But like also, I really do, when I have access to these people for the first 12 weeks, I really do consider how their rehab sessions have been going and how they look. Like if they're smashing forward heel tap step downs and they have good form and they have good quad burn and they're like doing a really, really good job with them, then I don't really like, I mean, I care, but let's just say they do really bad on their quad strength today. It's like, oh, they did really bad on their quad strength today, but that doesn't overshadow or it doesn't make me feel bad about their quad strength because they've shown me 4 weeks of really, really excellent quad control, if that makes sense. So it's more so just like a checkpoint and not so much of a like hard stop. It'd probably be a little different if I had a kid come in and I've never seen them before, and I'd probably look at their test way more critically than if I was rehabbing with them day by day and week by week, if that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. But honestly, if they're testing at 50 and 45 at 12 weeks, your oh crap moment probably happened 4 weeks ago. Like, you know what I mean? Like you shouldn't be surprised by a 45 LSI. You should be like, yep, this checks out because they look like garbage. They can't move their knee over their toe. They can't single leg squat at all. They can't do a forward step down. They weight shift with every bilateral squat you give them. Like you should kind of like, these things should start, basically these tests should kind of support your 12-week rehab, not condemn your 12-week rehab, if that makes sense. Is the way I look at it. It's kind of like, oh, like things are going the way that I'm seeing them, to give me some sort of objective measure and not just bias me because I'm like, oh, I like this kid. They're working hard. I want to see them run. I'm actually giving them hard data on that. Yep, yep. Um, sure. Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I appreciate you, Caitlin. And like I said, I'm not like going through chart auditing just every ACL. I don't like search ICD-10 codes through Atlanta Rehab and be like, "Oh, what are these people doing with their?" If the only times I ever do it are when like people ask me to, or if like I have a patient transitioning over and I'm trying to get a good picture of what they're going to look like on their first day and what they've been doing. So I'm, at least educating myself on what they can be comfortable with. So yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you, Caitlin. John, anything else, or Biggie, anything else that y'all want to? Yeah. Yeah, and I appreciate it. And to be fair, we're still trying to all kind of figure this out. Like there's not really a model that follows what we're doing with these performance clinics and having established clinics as well. There's models all over the country that have performance cash-based clinics, and then there's models that have clinics and everything like that. So we're still trying to figure it out. So if you guys have any suggestions or anything that you feel like could make it better, we're still kind of in the infant stages with this stuff. It's 2 years in. I'm not pretending like I've got this whole system figured out. So if you guys do have a suggestion or anything that you guys can think of that would, make this a better reflection of our company or a better way for us to, present this out here for everybody, or for new hires or for current hires or something like that, I'm all ears and open to suggestions, because it's still kind of a fluid learning process for all of us. Yeah, Teach. All right. Well, y'all have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.